Thanks to ExpressVPN for supporting the Productivity Show. You probably don't think much about internet privacy on your own home network. ExpressVPN will secure your privacy and protect your information. Visit expressvpn.com/TPS and you can get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. Thanks to Raycon Wireless Earbuds for supporting the Productivity Show. Raycon earbuds start at about half the price of any other premium wireless earbuds on the market. Get 15% off your order at buyraycon.com/TPS. Welcome to the Productivity Show, podcast by Asian Efficiency to help you maximize your productivity so you can get everything done without having to sacrifice your health, family, and things that matter to you. We've helped tens of thousands of people save time, be happier, and become more productive. Today, I'm joined by Tiago Forte, founder of Forte Labs and the creator of Building a Second Brain. It's a system he developed for organizing ideas and information to help people become more productive and creative. If you're a knowledge worker and you want to be more efficient and organized, then you are going to love today's episode. We are also going to host a live webinar together on the topic of building a second brain on August 10th, and you can sign up for it here at theproductivityshow.com/brain. You can also find links to everything that we share in the show notes by going to theproductivityshow.com/310. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another episode of the Productivity Show. How are you doing today, Tiago?
I'm happy. I'm so happy to be here, Tan. Thank you.
I'm excited to chat with you here today because we have basically two productivity nerds together on this podcast. And my co-host Brooks, he's a productivity nerd as well and a geek. But today I have another geek with me, and we're going to be talking a lot about how you're productive, how you organize information, how you just go about your life. And I think a lot of people are going to learn so much from you here today. But one of the things we always like to do on the Productivity Show is start off with the top 3 favorite resources. Now, since you are the guest, I'm going to ask you, can you maybe share in 90 seconds or less, what are some of your favorite resources, goods, tools, books you've recently consumed?
Okay. Yeah, let's do it. 90 seconds. We'll make this quick. Number 1, I'm going to say the Hours Tracker app. This is an app for iOS. It might also have an Android version that allows you to track your time. It costs a few bucks, maybe $5 at most. And what I like most about it is that it's not automatic. Some of these apps run in the background and claim to do it all for you. I've not found that to be effective. So basically, you have to clock in and clock out of each activity, which is so good for developing your self-awareness. When you have to actually decide when you're starting and when you're stopping, it really develops that awareness and that self-discipline to be very clear about what you're working on. So that's number 1. The second one is free. It's a newsletter called Breaking Smart, spelled just as you would think, Breaking Smart, from the person who's been most influential on my thinking. His name is Venkatesh Rao. And Breaking Smart is kind of hard to describe, but it's a highly speculative and imaginative newsletter about how technology is changing society, how technology is changing business and human relationships and the way people think and the way people live, which a few months ago was just kind of interesting in light of the COVID pandemic and the lockdown and everything that's happening in the world. I feel like is now essential reading for anyone that just wants to understand how the world is changing, because it's changing ever faster. And then the third one, I'm going to do a hardware recommendation, which is the GorillaPod. The GorillaPod is a product I've heard about for years that I finally decided to purchase. And it's basically, it seems at first like a tripod, but it's a tripod with bendable, kind of adaptable legs. They can be bent and twisted around things and through things. And the reason I like it is I make video and content, but I don't want to be one of these people that has an entire room of their house dedicated to just lenses and cameras and equipment. I don't really, find that to be very satisfying. There's limited space in my house. So I like tools that serve many purposes, right? Multifunctional, very utilitarian tools that can be a tripod, or they can be a mount, or they can be an outdoor filming thing. It's like they're good for travel. I can take them on the road. So I like that I can accomplish multiple uses with that one pretty small product.
I love that. And we're going to have links to all of that here in the show notes as well. And I have a GorillaPod myself too, and I've been using it for the last, I want to say, 5 or 6 years because I travel a lot, and it's a great way to hang your camera on a tree or something, or on a pole, or if you're at the airport and you want to shoot something real quick. Great little gadget and tool that I also definitely use and recommend. So, Tiago, for those who don't know who you are, we're going to be diving into a little bit about your system, your personal productivity system called Building a Second Brain, which you've kind of like developed a whole course around too. And also, you've done a lot of interviews on this topic, but also helped so many people organize information and ideas. But for those who don't know who you are, can you share a little bit about your story and how you developed the system?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been self-employed for 7 years. Actually, this month. This month is the 7 year anniversary of my company, which is called Forte Labs. And throughout that time, I've taught online courses. That's really been my primary focus and my source of revenue. And what I'm known for is online education. And the funny thing is, I sort of fell in love with online education at the same time that I fell in love with productivity. I learned them kind of around the same time, 2012, 2013. So that's really what I've been doing from the very beginning, is teaching online courses specifically about productivity, but more specifically, how to use technology, how to use software to be more productive. There's just been an incredible, and continues to be an incredible demand for that. I think because there's ever more productivity apps. That every year there's a whole new wave of these productivity software programs. And yet, for the most part, these companies aren't very good at training, right? They might have like a getting started guide or a blog or a YouTube channel, but they're not very good at explaining to a newcomer, to someone who is just trying to figure it out, how it should be used. Like, not how it should be used, not just at the basic, like how to use certain features, but like the big picture level. What is the big picture of how I should use this program? So over the years, I've just developed what is now a curriculum of different online courses. The most prominent and the most well-known one being Building a Second Brain, which you mentioned. And really, with that course, I've just tapped into, I think, an incredible hunger for knowledge management systems. We are all now knowledge workers. We've sort of gotten used to that. Yeah, I'm a knowledge worker. I spend my days managing knowledge, managing information. And yet, no one ever taught us what it means to be a knowledge worker. Like, what does it actually look like? How does one save or capture knowledge? How does one organize knowledge? How does one deploy or share or retrieve or resurface knowledge? All these things are quite foreign to most people, despite the fact that we spend all day, every day, most of us, at least the people listening to this podcast, managing different kinds of information. So that's really what I focus on these days, is what I call PKM, personal knowledge management for individuals.
One of the things I've always found very interesting is that what you mentioned, most of us are used to working with lots of information, documents, databases, right? And we are in this sort of information age, and people are kind of assumed to know how to use a calendar, how to use email effectively, and all these other different tools that we have. But no one's ever actually taught us how to use all these different tools, right? We might use a feature in Outlook and know that we need to hit reply if we want to respond to an email. But beyond that, there's no comprehensive system. And so what you're saying is, when we're dealing with all this information on a daily basis in our work, and our brain is heavily relied upon to do our work this way, wouldn't it be useful to actually have some training or some sort of system in place that shows us how to maximize our brain power and also our efficiency? Is that what you're kind of teaching?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And that's actually part of my story too, is my first job was a consulting firm, this boutique consulting firm in San Francisco. I had taken a long time to do college, and then traveled after college, and then gone to the Peace Corps. So I was like 25 starting my first kind of real job. And I remember, so I walked into this consulting firm, and my manager just happened to be really, really good at productivity. His name was Charles. He was a French guy. He introduced me to Things, the task manager I still use to this day. I learned from him how to manage my time, how to, manage my email, all these things. And I was so lucky to have him. But then a couple of years after that job, when I started my own business, I thought, well, what about all the other people that didn't have an awesomely productive manager as their very first person teaching them. Because really that's what I found is the way most people learn this stuff, right? Like you start your job and you just look around and you go, okay, how are people doing things around here? How are they conducting meetings? How are they setting goals? How are they tracking their priorities? And then you just copy that, even sometimes without knowing it. And if you think about it, what are the chances that those behaviors you just mimic from the people around you are the best, most effective behaviors? Practically nothing, practically no chance.
I've seen that too in my very first job as well. Most of the things I learned was kind of ad hoc and wasn't actually the most effective way, and I had to relearn a lot of different things. And I think one of the things that you and I can do to the world is kind of share our gifts and say, hey, this is actually the most effective way for being productive and trying to get these important things done. So let's start diving into the actual technicalities of building a second brain. Can you kind of explain the concepts and how it works?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. So I think it's pretty clear the second brain, what I call your second brain, is your system of personal knowledge management. So I think we have to start there. When I say second brain, I'm really referring quite simply to a software program. This software program resides on your desktop computer, on your laptop, on your smartphone, on your tablet. It can be synced across different devices, and you can choose which one you use. In my course and everything I teach is platform agnostic. So it's about principles and it's about techniques and it's about practices that apply across many different kinds of apps. And the people in my course, actually, we survey them when they come in. We say, what software are you using? And there's probably 24 different programs that people are using just in my course, which is so cool because, if all of this depended on one company and one software program, it'd be pretty risky, right? It'd be pretty hard to really go all in on it. But it's not. It's really broader than that. And so what we're talking about is this software program, the second brain, where you do really three things. This is what my course is broken up into: is capturing, organizing, and sharing are kind of the three pillars, the three legs of the stool. And they exist independently, so you can focus on each one kind of one at a time, but then they also, of course, kind of interact, I would say. And so what does that look like? Basically, capturing is sort of just like the practical details of how you get information into your second brain, right? There's still we've made incredible leaps and bounds over the past few years in how to do this, but there's just so many options now of plugins, and there's, Chrome extensions in your browser for saving web pages. There's quick capture apps for your phone for jotting down quick notes. There's photos that you can take on your mobile device and then share to your notes app. There's iPad apps where you can draw things and then share, or do mind maps and then share those things back to your second brain. So it does take a little bit of work on the front end, and we spent a good week and a half on this in my course, just figuring out, okay, which notes app are you using? How are you using it? How are you going to capture text? How are you going to capture images, video, audio? There's a series of sort of like policy decisions, like what's going to be your default way of capturing, say that this is actually what we do, is the top 5 sources of information in your life. And it helps in that process to kind of see what other people are doing, right? If you find someone who's more experienced, often another student in the course who's kind of figured out some of these things, you can kind of borrow their decisions. So that's the first step, is just you have information, content in your second brain. Then we move on to organize, right? It's not enough. As good as search is, as powerful as tagging is, all these different things, you cannot, in my experience, just dump it all into one giant pile and expect to be able to find anything. So I have an organizational system. That's probably the specific technique that I'm most well known for, which is called PARA. That's spelled P-A-R-A. We can put a link in the show notes. It's kind of the gateway to everything that I do. And it's essentially a very simple way of organizing all of the information in your life. And people don't believe this in the beginning, right? But I'm talking about one simple system with only 4 categories, which are projects, areas, resources, and archives. Those are the letters of PARA that you can use to organize your documents folder, your Google Docs, Google Drive, your Dropbox, the bookmarks in your web browser, your task manager, your notes app. I mean, all these different apps can be organized using the very same system. It's kind of crazy. And that system, it's not just organizing for organizing's sake, which is the constant trap, right? To create this grand, elaborate, wonderful hierarchy that, information gets put into to die, that never really gets found again. And then the third pillar is share. Most people who are into this kind of knowledge management, productivity stuff, they often are introverts. They're often kind of internal facing. They want to create their own systems, their own platforms. But I really have a philosophy that the purpose of knowledge is to be shared. The purpose, the real value of knowledge inherently is to give it away. Right. And actually, you don't really know if knowledge is useful, if it's even true or interesting or helpful until you put it out into the real world and you see, does it actually help someone? Does it actually solve real world problems? Does it actually change anything? And so I really push people in the last part of the course, once they've built up the system and they're more confident, to think about how they want to share it, whether that's in a blog, on their social media, in a podcast, or even just in their work projects or with their colleagues or with their family. So that's kind of the 3 stages of the journey. And it really is a journey that we go through in my 5-week course.
One of the things you mentioned, whether it was another podcast or a blog post that I read of yours, is you said something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing this, is your fluency in information is directly related to your productivity and success. And I thought that was a really interesting statement because, as you were mentioning, as you become more effective in organizing information and ideas and notes, it does, from my point of view at least, it does make you more effective. It does make you more organized. It does make you more productive, right? So to give you a real world example, I'm sure people can relate to this. Let's say you have to do your taxes and you go, oh man, where's this receipt that I have somewhere, right? And people will go, oh, let me find it. And then they go down this rabbit hole. It takes like 20 minutes to find this one particular receipt. And then they have to do this like 50 times. And as a result, it's really inefficient. Whereas if you had a system in place, that would make it so much easier, right? Just like many people are dealing with lots of emails and attachments. That's a big problem that I see a lot of people are dealing with. And they have no idea how to organize all of that, right? It's just a big pile of documents somewhere in the inbox or in a downloads folder that's completely unorganized, right? So how does your system kind of like address all these different things?
Yeah, that's really it. Is knowledge is, I kind of see it as like a more fundamental layer underlying productivity. Because if you look at, I started the first course that I taught was on your to-do list. It was a GTD course, getting things done course. And what I noticed over time as I was, managing my own to-do list and helping others manage theirs is every single task has an associated piece of information, right? It's never just do this. It's do this with this email, do that with this phone number, go to this website. There's always a link or a number or an address or contact, some piece of information that's needed to execute that task more effectively. And I started thinking, wait, my to-do list is actually kind of simple. It's almost just like a list of verbs, just actions. What really seems to matter here is the information that those tasks refer to, right? And it's like you said, you can have the most streamlined, perfect to-do list. If one of those, the very most important, perfectly prioritized task at the very top of that list is go find that receipt, and then you have to spend half an hour finding that receipt, it doesn't matter how efficient or effective the action is if all the background work to find that receipt is so time consuming. So I almost think of knowledge as like a highly leveraged form of productivity. It's almost like a little compressed artifact of productivity that's like compressed into this one little like gold nugget, right? And a great example of that is content. We're sitting here recording this podcast. It's going to take us an hour, significant investment of time. 2 people times 1 hour, that's 2 hours. But then you're going to post it. And all the work, the productivity that we did to schedule this, to prepare for it, to organize it, to upload it, to edit it, all those things, then gets utilized 1,000, I don't know how many listeners you have, but many thousands of times, right? So it's like you did the work once and then you get the benefit again and again and again so many times. And you know what? Even if you don't have an email list and a website and a blog, something as simple as, let's say you onboard a vendor to your company, something completely internal. If you just take a few minutes to make a checklist out of that process, which a checklist is knowledge, that's a form of knowledge, then the next time, a few months from now, when you have to do it again and you can just run through that checklist, that's the exact same principle. You did the work once, but by saving and capturing that knowledge, you get to benefit from that work far into the future. So that's kind of how my endless pursuit of productivity led me kind of inevitably to knowledge, because knowledge is like a 10 to 100x more potent form of productivity.
I like how you said leverage, because one of the examples that came to my mind that I've seen in many other people's cases is when the knowledge or information is not organized, it tends to lead to a lot of procrastination, right? So as an example, let's say your task is to do your taxes, right? And if you don't have your receipts organized, if you don't have the documents organized, and you still have to find all these different things, you can make excuses for yourself to say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to do this because I will first will have to find these documents, and you start to make all these excuses. And so if your information and documents and pieces of knowledge is not organized, it gives us so many reasons or roadblocks to never get started.
Absolutely. I found the same thing. Most people's to-do list, they think it's a list of actions, but it's actually a list of research projects. Right? They sit down, and each task, it might even seem like it's just a task. It might be, call so-and-so. But then, and this is what I discovered in my teaching and in my coaching, I've literally sat down with people in person or on Zoom and just gone through their to-do list and asked them questions about it. And something as simple as, call Tom over at X company. You ask them, okay, what keeps you from taking action on that now? And it's, because before I call Tom, I have to look up his phone number. Before I can get his phone number, I have to go back through our email thread and find what was the last thing he asked of me. Before I do that, I have to talk to my vice president and see how they want me to propose. It's like this, it's almost like the thread in a sweater. You start pulling that little thread, and soon this massive thing has unraveled. And you're right. When you have that much friction, that's really what it comes down to, is roadblocks, obstacles, friction. Then every time you look at your to-do list, it's like putting a giant weight on your shoulders, right? Because your subconscious mind knows. Your subconscious mind always tells the truth. And when it looks at that list, it knows all the complexity and confusion that is lying below the surface. So you can't really fool yourself. You can fool your conscious mind, but not your subconscious mind. And so really what I prefer to do is kind of address the root cause of that, which is you can manage all that complexity, that underlying kind of uncertainty, but not in your head. You can't do it in your head. That's why you need a second brain. Because when you can have an external place where all those little tiny details can be perfectly preserved and tracked, then suddenly your to-do list is not this giant list of research projects. It's just these links that link out to your second brain. And when you go there, you go to that note in your second brain, the full details that you are supposed to keep track of are there. So really, I see knowledge management as kind of like the missing link. It's kind of like the missing ingredient to most people's to-do lists.
Maybe you're working from home, maybe you're out for a walk, or maybe you're hitting the gym. Either way, you want to hear what you're listening to, not what your neighbors are listening to. I always recommend people get a great pair of wireless earbuds. But before you go drop hundreds of dollars on a pair, you need to go check out the wireless earbuds from Raycon. We teamed up with Raycon, and they're offering 15% off your order at buyraycon.com/TPS. Raycon earbuds start at about half the price of any other premium wireless earbuds on the market, and they sound just as great as the other top audio brands you know. I've been using my Raycon earbuds for a while now, and I really like them. They're really comfortable and perfect for working out and long walks. I've been even taking them into the sauna, and they sound great and are really comfortable. Unlike any other wireless options out there, Raycon earbuds are stylish and discreet. There's no dangling wires or stems hanging down. Their newest model is the one I have, the Everyday E25 earbuds. They have about 6 hours of playtime, really easy Bluetooth pairing, more bass, and a compact design that gives you a nice noise isolating fit. Get the latest and greatest from Raycon. Get 15% off your order at buyraycon.com/TPS. That's buyraycon.com/TPS for 15% off Raycon wireless earbuds. buyraycon.com/TPS. Have you ever thought about internet privacy and security on your own home network? Sure, you might be careful when you go to a cafe or a hotel, but at home? A lot of us don't think about that, but you should. That's why even when I'm at home, I never go online without using ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN encrypts 100% of your data with best-in-class encryption, so your information is always protected. You can go online with confidence from your computer, from your tablet, or from your smartphone. ExpressVPN works with all of them. Just tap one button and you're protected. Your internet connection is then rerouted through ExpressVPN's secure servers, so your IP is anonymized and can't be traced back to you. Even your internet service provider can't see what you're doing. I like how I don't have to have a different VPN solution for all my different devices. Everything just works and it's easy to turn on. No messing around in settings. If I'm on my laptop, my phone, or my iPad, I just tap the button to start ExpressVPN and I'm set. So protect your online activity today with a VPN that I trust to secure my privacy. Visit my special link at expressvpn.com/TPS. You can get an extra 3 months free on a 1-year package. That's expressvpn.com/TPS. Go to expressvpn.com/TPS to learn more. Let's get into practical details. So I think people now will understand, okay, on a high level, I get the idea of building a second brain, having the right knowledge and documents and pieces of information ready to go when I need them. So what would you recommend to people just on a practical level that they can do starting today or just this week as they're listening to this episode of things that they can implement, something super simple, practical, and see some results right away?
Yeah, so I would say if you have existing notes or content, I'm going to give 2 recommendations. One for people who have at some point downloaded Microsoft OneNote or Google Keep or Evernote or Notion or one of these apps, and they've kind of already tried experimenting with it. And then another recommendation for people that just have never heard of this before, right? So if you already have some notes, the classic case is you downloaded Evernote a few years ago and started capturing things. It makes it so easy to capture things. But then you're just like, what do I do with this? I just have hundreds of random notes in my inbox. I have no idea what to do next. If that's you, I would really look at my Para framework. I came up with Para years ago when I worked at the Apple Store. I worked at the Apple Store Fashion Valley in San Diego, which at the time was one of the busiest Apple stores in the world. We were consistently in the top 5. And I was responsible for what at the time were called personal training sessions. People would come in, they would pay for these 1 hour. It's kind of like the beginning of my work, just sitting with people and helping them figure out how they were going to use, their computers. And I would have 1 hour. Right? So someone would come in with their several-year-old Mac computer and be like, hey, I need to get organized. And I have 60 minutes. Right? So we couldn't sit there, and I've done this too, going file by file. Okay, what is this? Where does it go? What is this? Where does it go? That would have taken many, many hours, if not days. I needed a way in 60 minutes to very quickly just triage what in some cases were hundreds or thousands of files and folders into a small number of very simple buckets. And I tried many different variations. What I ended up on was 4, which are, as I said, projects. And let me kind of give you a little more detail on this so you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Basically, there's 4 categories, 4 buckets that any conceivable piece of information in your life can be sorted into, which is kind of hard to believe, right? You have a complex life. You work on a lot of different things. No, 4 categories. What are your projects? Projects are short-term things that you're working on that have a beginning and an ending and a goal, right? You're trying to achieve a certain outcome, a goal, and you're trying to do it by a certain time, right? Like this episode of this podcast might be a project. You're trying to record and publish this podcast by this certain date and then send it to your audience. And actually, one of the first exercises we do in my course is to make a project list, which incredibly is something that many people have never done. They have a to-do list, they have a goal list, But projects is sort of that middle layer between what you're like the day-to-day tasks you're doing now and your long-term goals for the future. Well, the medium term is projects, right? Like what's going to be done in like a week to a month to maybe a couple months from now. That's the horizon that you should be focusing on. And so that's projects. Second one is areas. Areas of responsibility are just kind of the different hats that you wear in your life, the different things you're responsible for. Things like your home, your car, your finances, your health, your learning. At work, you might have things like, communications, marketing, product development, management, things like that. And areas are different from projects because they don't end, right? You have a relationship with your spouse that goes on basically indefinitely. You have a place you live that goes on indefinitely. They're kind of continuous responsibilities. The third bucket is resources. So resources are really just kind of interesting, useful things you want to keep that don't fit into projects and areas. You clip a website, an interesting PDF, some notes from a web page, some notes from this podcast interview, just kind of learning resources. And then archives is things from the other three buckets that are no longer active. Okay. Because this is the constant danger with knowledge management is you keep collecting and capturing and gathering, and the thing starts expanding and expanding and expanding. And no matter how good your system is or how good the software is, eventually it's going to expand to be overwhelming. So we have this archives category so that as projects, areas, and resources get either completed or they become inactive or they get postponed or they're not yet started, they're just in the future. For any reason they're not active, you have this sort of archive. It's kind of like those file folders in your garage that kind of just sit there until you need them, which is the final A in para. And that's it. Those four categories, once you identify those, what goes in each one for your particular circumstances, you can apply them everywhere. I use it to manage my Google Docs, to manage Evernote, to organize things, my task manager. So instead of having what most people have, which is best case scenario, a different organizational system in every place, think about how crazy that is, right? Across all the dozens of places that you keep information, to have a completely different system and approach for each one. Instead, you have one organizing method which is applied across all these different places. So that's para. And I encourage you, I made this article free. Some of my other blog posts are paywalled, but I made the para article, which is really kind of a step-by-step guide, completely free because it has such a tremendous impact on people. And I encourage your listeners to start there.
Yeah, we'll be sure to add a link to that article in the show notes. So when it comes to someone who's completely new and never heard of, your system and just like is new to productivity in general, what would you recommend that they do?
Yeah. So for someone who's new to this, and this what I call the second brain movement is growing quickly. It's not just me. The term second brain is popping up absolutely everywhere. There's every week, it seems, there's a new company or blog or Twitter account kind of talking about the second brain idea. So it's much broader than just what I'm doing, but it's growing fast. And so more and more people are being introduced to it. And what I would suggest, and we can put links to these in the show notes as well, two things. I have an overview article. It's kind of like if you want the whole second brain philosophy in a few thousand words, you can start there. It's one of the most popular articles on my blog. And it doesn't get so much into the practical details. For those, I have other posts. But in the early stages, you just have to kind of wrap your head around this concept, right? It can be a challenge to really, and I think the reason it's a challenge is it affects so many things. When you have a reliable place outside of your head where you can preserve and access all of the information in your life, it changes everything. It changes how you manage your time. It changes how you manage your goals. It changes how you communicate. It changes how you plan. It changes how you think, how you learn. It has all these ripple effects. And so I suggest people start with that article and really try to grasp what it means to have a second brain and what we mean when we say that. And if you're more inclined to video, I have more or less that same kind of overview in I believe it's like a 30 or 40-minute video with very good visuals and diagrams and illustrations and photos for those of you who are more visual. So I would include links to one of those or both of those things, and people can kind of see whether the second brain thing is something that they want to take on for themselves.
Since we are on the productivity show, we have a lot of listeners who are also more advanced, people who've been studying productivity for a while. And I'm sure some of them have this question as well, which is, what's the difference between building a second brain or having a second brain and something like GTD? Because I know people are oftentimes, when they get introduced to David Allen and some of his thinking and his work, he always talks about, the brain is not for having ideas, right? It's you want to, he talks about getting out of your brain as well. So how is your system kind of like different or the same compared to David Allen?
Yeah, great question. I think it's really an extension of it. It's really an extension. I started in the GTD world. My first course, which is still around today, it's called Getting Stuff Done Like a Boss, teaches the GTD method. David had me on his podcast, his members only, I think it's called GTD Connect podcast. We talked for an hour and a half about different things. So I'm very close to that world. And actually building a second brain, I don't think wouldn't exist if it wasn't for GTD, because teaching GTD, which is David's system, and really seeing the power of that idea that you can offload things from your mind onto a trusted external system and how that completely frees you up. It basically unshackles you. It sets you free. And something like more than, I think, 15,000 people took my course where I taught GTD. But then something interesting happened. People would come out of that course with incredible results, and they would ask me, okay, I did this for my to-do list, for my tasks, for my actionable information, but how about all the rest of the information? Like the other 90% of what can be called non-actionable, or sometimes it's called reference information, or just information, right? Talking about, lists and notes and highlights from books and web clippings and bookmarks and PDFs and scans of documents, and the list goes on and on and on, right? What about all that? And my explorations with the second brain started there, where I just thought, okay, well, how do I do it for myself? Back in the day, I had a really severe kind of mysterious medical condition that, if you have any experience with the American healthcare system, it's like having a part-time job if you have any kind of chronic condition, right? Each individual doctor gives you all these documents and all this advice and all these things to do. And we don't have sort of a unified national healthcare system. So I had to become a researcher and document all these different things from all these different doctors and specialists. And so I just started teaching, at first to my friends and family, eventually to just random people online, and now to my customers and students, how to do that same principle: manage your life not in your own head, but with notes, with digital notes. And so I think they're highly complementary. They tackle different kinds of information. GTD is actionable. Building a second brain is everything else. And I would also say people who have a really good GTD system, who are very good at that next action thinking, they take to the second brain very, very quickly, because they kind of already have that background and they kind of already have that habit. So yeah, I would say they're kind of like twins.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to switch gears here for a moment, because I also want to dive into kind of like your own personal life and personal productivity system, because obviously you have your own system, but I'm also curious to hear about your habits and how you get ready for the day, because I think it's always interesting to see how other people are productive in their own way, and we can always learn from others. And so can you describe to me what a typical work week or work day looks like for you, and how you kind of get ready, how you plan, how you tackle stuff and get stuff done?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that. I'm really kind of on a weekly review kick these days. It's the weekly review. I kind of, my thinking is that, productivity, day-to-day working it's like battle. It's like being in this crazy storm of noise and information and chaos and things happening and things arising. It's like most of the time I want to be free to respond and to adapt as the workday is changing, and it's always changing. And so I kind of get all my productivity habits and I centralize them. I compress them into one single time once a week. I usually do it on like a Sunday or Monday or Tuesday. That is it's like my one time a week that I get all the insanity of my life and I put it all into my task manager and turn it into just a simple list of the things that I have to get done that week. So we can go through the weekly review. It's kind of based on GTD. Once again, it's adapted from that, but it's essentially it's 5 steps. It's clearing each one of the inboxes in my life is one way of thinking of it, right? An inbox is just simply a place where information collects. The first one is my email. So that's kind of the main one, right? Like every time I visit my inbox, just like most people, it's just full of new things. So I clear the inbox and flow the notes that I take from emails into my notes app, which is Evernote, and any tasks into my task manager, which is Things. So it's sort of like this, it's like one river becoming two. And then I check my calendar just to see what I have that day and what I have coming up the next couple days. Then I clear my notes inbox. Actually, that's over here. And then I clear my task manager inbox and kind of flow those back, right? The two strands of the river come back together in the form of my today list, which is a feature of Things where out of all the different tasks that you've created, and in my case, I have hundreds, I choose just 10. That's my rule for myself. I can't add more than 10 tasks to my today list because I know over the long term, I usually finish maybe 7 or 8. And so 10 is sort of like my stretch goal. And that process I just described really takes me half an hour to 45 minutes, maybe once a week, and is the entirety of my productivity kind of routine.
I love that. I think it really emphasizes the idea that the more you can kind of plan ahead, ideally even a week ahead of time, the more productive you will become. Because I'm sure you've experienced it too, where once you skip that weekly review or you don't really plan your upcoming week, you're just not as productive as you normally are.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's funny with the weekly review because you skip it the first time and it's like, oh, well, nothing terrible happened. There were no disasters, right? Nothing exploded. And then this next week comes by. Oh, I skipped it again. No big deal. It's like the third or the fourth week when everything just completely falls apart. Right? It's kind of like maintenance on your car. Yeah, you could skip an oil change. You could skip all kinds of stuff. You could probably go a few years. But then when it comes time for the reckoning, it's all going to just be a disaster. And so I kind of think of the weekly review, it's like you were saying, having visibility is so important, knowing what's coming. And often you don't really have to do much based on that information, right? Like I knew the interview with you was coming yesterday morning when I glanced at my calendar. I knew this was coming. And so like in all honesty, didn't do much prep work. I didn't have a lot of research to do. I was just going to riff on my usual topics. But just in the back of my mind, knowing that we were going to have this conversation, my mind has this thing where it kind of works in the background, right? I was thinking of examples and metaphors and concepts and ways of explaining things just because in a split second, I had seen on my calendar, oh, I'm talking to Tian tomorrow. So really it's about having visibility and having awareness, not just about going through a checklist, right? So yeah, it's really powerful. And I just published a super in-depth, really detailed article called The One Touch Guide to Doing a Weekly Review, where I step through each one of these steps that I go through, these 5 steps. I have videos showing how I complete each one that have been very successful. So we can add a link to that too, but I encourage listeners to check that out. And there you'll have my entire weekly review process laid out for you very, very neatly.
Awesome. I know a lot of people who are listening will love that review process because I know that's one of the things that people struggle with the most. And I've struggled with the most, especially when I first started learning about GTD. And most people who struggle with GTD, I find that the weekly review is the hardest part. Because like you said, you can skip it 1 week. It's not going to have any detrimental effect right away, or at least be perceived that way. But it's not until you skip it a few times where you go, oh, man, this is now coming into place. And you start to realize, wow, I shouldn't have skipped this. Or you start to be really stressed in the week in that moment, but you don't connect it to the fact that you didn't see that coming because you skipped your weekly review, right? And if you done your weekly review for many years and you skip it 1 week and you start to stress out, you oftentimes realize, oh, wow, it's because I skipped it.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's hard to see that. It's hard to close the loop and see that, oh, why am I stressed? It's because I forgot about the call this afternoon and I was late to it. Why was I late? Because I didn't look at my calendar yesterday. Why didn't I look at my calendar yesterday? Because I didn't do it's like this chain of causality all the way back. And oftentimes, it's the funny thing where really the purpose of planning is so that mistakes and disasters don't happen. But then when they don't happen, no one goes, oh, see, this thing didn't happen because of that process, because it just never happened. Right. And this is how I think there's a temptation to fall into a trap of solving emergencies, fighting fires. Right. Because an emergency kind of calls you into action. It's very clear what you need to do. It's very obvious just what needs to be done. You can spring into action. You can put everything else aside. You get positive reinforcement. People go, oh, thank you for solving the fire. Thank you for coming to our rescue. You get rewarded. You get respect. You get status, all these things. But then I always wonder, well, what if that had never happened? It had been prevented in the first place, and you had used all that energy and time to do some completely other thing that would have really been building towards the future and led you toward your goals. So I feel like it's preventative maintenance, it's an investment. And also I think people really misunderstand the weekly review. That was part of my motivation for writing that guide. Is if it's taking more than 30 or 45 minutes, I think you're really doing it wrong. Because the weekly review is reviewing what needs to be done, not doing it. Okay. If it takes more than 30 or 45 minutes, you are getting sucked into doing things, not just reviewing the things that need to be done. Right. So really, if you look at my weekly review checklist, it's a series of very quick kind of light touches. I'm just quickly kind of building my situational awareness, just my awareness of what's happening and what's on the radar, and then postponing any real work, any execution, any heavy lifting to strategic times during the week that I'm deciding. I'm not reacting to or doing it at the last minute because it's on fire, but I'm deciding, okay, this thing I'm going to schedule for Wednesday afternoon, this thing for Tuesday morning, this thing for next week. And that way, when that time comes, you have a plan, you know what needs to be done. You don't have to waste a bunch of time trying to figure out what you should be doing next. That's really I think the philosophy behind the weekly review.
Tiago, I really enjoyed this conversation that we had today, and I'm really looking forward to our joint training that we're going to be doing, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes here today. But if people want to find out more about you, your work, and all the other stuff you have going on, where should they go?
Yeah, it's been a blast. It's great to nerd out on these things. Really, the home base is fortelabs.co. That's FORTELABS.co, not .com. Forte Labs is the name of my company. And what you'll find there is everything from links to our courses, links to the books that I've written for Amazon Kindle. You'll find the blog. I publish a ton of blog posts, my podcast, my YouTube channel, all the usual stuff. And if you're specifically interested in my course, which is the main thing that I do, just go to buildingasecondbrain.com and you'll find lots more information, including an email form. If you subscribe to that form, you'll start receiving my weekly newsletter, but also you'll receive a series of, I think it's 7 or 8 emails that I have, an email sequence, where I just introduce you to the ideas. Just one short email at a time. I think I send 1 email a day for about a week, just kind of some of the main practices, some of the main ideas. And that's kind of a slow and steady way of learning what a second brain is. And then also when we do our next launch, we only open up the course for enrollment twice a year, in the spring and in the fall. You'll be the first to know. So that email list is sort of our waiting list. And I would love for your community to be a part of what we're doing.
Awesome. And we'll talk more about that on our live training together as well. And we'll have links to everything that we talked about today in the show notes as well. Thank you, Tiago, for being here today.
Amazing. Thanks, Tan. This has been awesome.
Do you wish there were more hours in a day? Are you behind on your to-do list? If you want to be more productive and get proven tools to help you save time, then you must check out our new productivity assessment. Within 2 minutes of taking this free assessment, the tool will generate a personal recommendation list of which apps, tools, and strategies that will work for you based on your life situation. To take the assessment, just go to theproductivityshow.com/quiz. Again, that URL is theproductivityshow.com/quiz. Take their free assessment today and you'll be on your way to becoming superhuman productive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next Productive Monday.